Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Daily Refinement. In this episode, we have a very special guest. We have Elijah. I'm going to have him introduce himself right now. He's also a 2019 eBay Shine finalist. So definitely, if you have some time, click the link in the description below and vote for him. You can vote 3 times a day, I think for 10 days straight, but we'll have Elijah explain the contest now. Elijah, what's going on? Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. So the eBay Shine Awards are, best of eBay small business awards that they do every year. I was a finalist last year, and now I'm a finalist again this year, which is fantastic. Basically, you send in an essay a couple months ago, and then they judge it. And then if you're in the top categories, you get into the top 8, and you have a chance to win a significant amount of prizes, both cash, charity donations, shipping credits, premium store subscriptions, and promotions. And they do a fantastic video on you. If you follow the link that he mentioned below, you can see a great 1-minute video on the business that I do, and you can see a lot of the inside of my facility space.
Awesome. So my group has an opportunity today to ask you some questions about your operation, and thank you for taking the time to share it with us. First off, let's talk about where do you live and what do you sell?
So I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and I sell bicycles and bicycle-related stuff. So vintage bikes, bike frames, new bike frames, bicycle parts, everything from like $1,000 rare one-off 80s frame to a $7 basic cable lock that I buy. So some new stuff that I buy dead stock from a couple different wholesalers, and some vintage stuff that I pick or buy out collections or buy at swaps or different things like that. And then our business is I'm the executive director, and our business is a nonprofit. So we exist primarily in order to give away, ensure transportation as a basic human right. We've given away over 13,000 bicycles to those in need in the last 16 years, taught free classes to over 6,000 students, and diverted over 1,000 tons of waste from the landfill. And eBay pays for about half of that. So that's been really, really fantastic.
And you also have an attached brick and mortar?
Yep, we have a brick and mortar, and we're opening a second location in partnership with the city of Madison, starting in the fall of this year. And we've been on eBay for about 8 years, 2011. Yeah, 8 years.
Okay, so this is really awesome because I had the opportunity last year to visit the Blind Center, which is like 100% eBay for charity type of deal as well. So you're the executive director. So does that mean a board of directors assigns you and determines compensation?
So it's an interesting blended model, very similar to Goodwill, where there's a for-profit and a nonprofit legal entity. So I own the for-profit, and then the for-profit donates significant amounts of money and resources to the nonprofit. And then I'm on the board of directors of the nonprofit along with a bunch of other people. The board of directors determines what kind of charitable stuff we do. And then me and the team sort of execute it. We have 9 full-time equivalent employees between the e-commerce work, the brick and mortar work, and then the extensive local and international charitable work that we do. And I have a huge vested interest in this personally. When I was 16, I was homeless, and I came to the space. It had been in existence for about a year, and they helped me build a bike for free. And I used that bike in order to get a job, and I used that job to get an apartment, and I used that apartment to get a business degree from UW-Madison, start a couple of different businesses, start doing business consulting, and really, really lean into e-commerce. And I came back to the organization to kind of lend my skills and my talent. And honestly, I've donated over 2/3 of my earnings for my life, to this organization.
That's incredible. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So now you have this business, and it's cool because it's also kind of a passion project.
Absolutely.
Do you have any ambitions to not run it? Because that sounds like a blast.
Well, I'm going to be doing less and less over the next 5 years. So we sort of have a phase out plan. It's very important for any sort of business or nonprofit organization to become, if you want it to scale, to become sustainable beyond you. So some of the best things I ever did was hiring somebody to do packing full time so that I don't do that. And so I focus more on like what you talk about, describing the objects. That's like some of the highest dollar value things that you can do. And I can focus more on relationship building with government entities, or finding people to donate money, or hunting out great deals for fantastic product, or building relationships with wholesalers. And sort of I keep training more people into those things and moving on to other sorts of stuff. I'm always going to be involved to some degree. Whether that looks like the full-time work that I'm doing now, or looks like more of a part-time assistance and consulting and relationship building, in 5 years from now, who's to say? But I'm really in it for at least the next 5 years on a full-time schedule like I'm doing right now.
What is missing for you being able to step out of it completely?
So there's a lot of skills that you guys all know this. There's a lot of skills that you build in making a successful e-commerce business and in making a successful brick and mortar that you just sort of have in your head and you take for granted. I can look at a bicycle and I can see money. I can see that it's not worth something. I can see that this part's not original. It's not from the same time period. And this specific piece is worth $80 and the rest of the bike is worth this or that. And so sort of that intuition, really understanding how your product interfaces with Cassini, the eBay search, so that you can type the right keywords, and then having a great knowledge about customer service and in-depth technical knowledge. It takes a long time for people to pick that up. And it's why I'm very comfortable sharing what I do and how I do it with people, because when you're working with specialty goods that require a lot of skills, like it took me 10 years in order to get to the point where I can deliver the technical information and customer service that allow us to sell the same products for more money than competitors, faster than competitors.
Yeah, I noticed you guys are taking advantage of combined order discounts. You have multi-order discounts on the same item. You're using all the tips and tricks that eBay recommends, and this is not easy to navigate. And being able to sell something for more than your competition is the key to longevity. You can never win the price race. So that's very cool that you're focusing on that. Also, I really am inspired by what you're doing because so few eBay businesses live beyond the founder. If you can create that model where it can sustain itself. When I visited the Blind Center, they have 15 people that work there that are blind. That's incredible. They have this magnification on these screens. Some people have limited eyesight to the point where the whole screen is only 2 characters. They're scrolling. Like, think about how difficult it must be to answer a customer service email when you can only read 2 letters on the screen. But the thing is, that business is self-sustaining. They have a fundraiser person that works there. The funds go in, the product goes in. They have program directors. It's insane how intricate it is to have a business run itself. So what you're doing is very admirable. That's very difficult. I think one of the things that people don't understand is how incredible it is to be able to hand off something to somebody else. That's incredible.
Whether it's your kids or family members or friends or the community, or even selling, to an outside investor or partner, I think it's an important step to be able to take, even if you do end up doing the same business, working at it full time for the rest of your life. You always want to be able to have the opportunity to walk away and do something else, because that means that you can make better, more rational decisions about how you run your business, because you're not stuck. And for me, that's really, really huge. Like, all of us were able to create these successful online businesses in our own niches, but the process of doing that is a huge skill that a huge number of people don't have. And once you've picked that up, sometimes a new opportunity will come along and you'll say, oh, I want to add this product, or I want to get into this service, or I want to get into this other thing. And you want to have the flexibility to do that. And in terms of monetarily, one of the things that's been super helpful for me with doing that, it was a big change from last year. So last year at eBay Open, I talked to a bunch of people, and I hadn't really been doing dead stock. I had wholesale accounts because of the retail store, but I hadn't been really using them. And I talked to some people and they had a lot of success with it. So I said, what the heck? I'll spend $3,000 on some old merchandise and I'll buy out what they've got and see what happens. And then that sort of snowballed from there to where I'm selling like, $10,000 of tires a month. And I'm making probably $5,000, $6,000 just on those tires alone. And in order to do that, you need to have some level of financial flexibility, because the deals come along. You can buy a pallet, your wholesaler's got a closeout, you can buy out a shipping container, whatever. But those deals are very lumpy, and it's going to be a couple $100, a couple $1,000, $20,000, $30,000. here and there that you're going to need to invest on something that's potentially a little bit risky. Like you don't necessarily, the best investments I've ever made in that area is stuff where there's not a lot of sales history on eBay. There aren't a lot of competitors who are selling it, but I have an intuition based off of my 10, 15 years of experience that the customers are going to like it, that the price is right. I got a UPC code for it. It's new product. I'm pretty sure it's going to work out. And so I will risk $8,000 on it. And a great one there was these tires. They're like $79.99 MSRP. A wholesaler had them for $8 each. They had 1,000 of them. I bought all of them. I wasn't really sure. I've sold a third of them and I've made double my money. And I have plenty of product left over. In order to get that financial flexibility, some great sources, if you don't have like the free cash flow to just have it laying around, which many of us don't, is either credit cards or personal lines of credit, and just building those ahead of time so you can get $1,000 or $5,000 from your bank at the drop of a hat. I mean, in the shoe game, this is huge, where you get an opportunity to buy however many of something that just dropped, and you're pretty sure that those are worth 2 or 3 times as much resale. You've got to have access to thousands of dollars in order to take advantage of that. Other good sources for this would be Square Capital or PayPal Capital. And I'd be a little cautious here in that credit card interest rates and personal line of credit interest rates from a bank or business line of credit interest from a bank are going to be much more reasonable in the like 6 to 14, 6 to 20% range. Whereas PayPal Capital and Square Capital, taking a look at those and like running them through a spreadsheet. And if you want me to share, it's a really basic spreadsheet. They're benchmarking about 12 to 13%, but they always overestimate how much time it's going to take for you to pay off. So if there's like a 18-month payoff period, there's a good chance you're probably going to pay it off in like 6 months unless your sales tank, which means you're paying 20 to 30% effective APR on that. Mm-hmm. And so you've got to be cautious about those. I've used PayPal lending twice. And in both cases, it was because a big like $20,000 investment opportunity appeared and I had to move on it in 6 hours.
I know you get that instant approval. The money is funded pretty quickly. One other tip with PayPal working capital is if once you become eligible, if you don't take the offer, the terms continue to improve because they have that pool of money, and the more desperate you are, the more they can charge you. Yep. So it is interesting. And also, you did something I always recommend is most likely it should be spent 100% on inventory. Oh,
absolutely. And on inventory that you're making 50% margins on or more.
I agree.
Because otherwise, like the interest rates don't really work out. Bank loans, like more longer term structured stuff where you can have the planning to say, how many shelves do I need? How many employees will I be adding? How much equipment will I be purchasing? You can make the decision in the timeline that a traditional bank loan, which is secured by your assets or is secured by your existing cash flow. And you can kind of make that work. And personal credit, of course, is also for smaller sellers is super, super helpful. Like if you get an opportunity to buy out, I don't know, a Ross is going out of business in your area and everything's 90% off. Well, maybe you should spend $7,000 at Ross. There's a lot of videos of people doing very well doing stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely when people are moving, people die, stores close, things are massively liquid. And when changes happen, there's always an opportunity. You buying those tires for $8 is probably an overstock situation or maybe a space situation for the distributor. Usually better than wholesale deals happen when something is transitioning. Yep. Which you need to be ready. That's incredible advice. So I'm going to back up a little bit to when you're becoming an expert in your niche. A lot of people are not patient. They bounce from category to category to category. Did you have an interest in bikes, or how did you develop this knowledge of what parts of bikes are valuable? Did you ride them a lot?
Yeah. Well, so when I was young, before I moved out of my parents' house, I was really into bikes. And I took a economics class and I looked at the supply and demand curve. And I just sort of had this like intuitive understanding of the whole thing. Like some people are willing to pay, there's a small number of people who are willing to pay lots of money for something. And there's a small number of people who are willing to sell something for very little. And this was right when Craigslist was starting to take off. And so I said, look, I'll take some of my money and I'll start flipping bikes on Craigslist, buying stuff for 50, selling it for 300. And it just sort of went from there, where that was pretty easy money because it was the early days of Craigslist. And Warren Buffett talks about how it's super easy to make a high return on a small amount of money, and it becomes much more difficult to make a high return on a larger amount of money. You know, if you want to double $300, you should be able to do that in a week or two, no problem. And so I was doing that, and that was good. And I was learning more and more and more about the technical aspects of things. And I was working with the bike nonprofit, and I was learning more and more there. I mean, there's always more to learn with bikes. In order to really be an expert in the field, it takes 10 years, 20 years. And I'm blessed to be surrounded with people who are also very, very good at different areas within that field. Yeah, and I just stuck with it. Like, I did a bunch of other things, but I was always making money on bikes. I was always looking at garage sales or going on Craigslist or looking for deals and things like that. And it really helps build a moat around your business. That's really where you see all these high profit small businesses, is in niche specializations that can't be automated, can't be eaten up. Like, I'm working on, I have a deal with Goodwill, the regional one here. I don't shop at Goodwill. I buy everything that they can't sell after 2 weeks, bicycle related, for a flat rate, and they deliver it. And because they don't have the built-in expertise for that. And so being patient, really learning how to do something that you care about. I mean, transportation access is huge to me. Like, it really helps people get jobs. It really helps people get access to economic security, to spend more time with their family, to spend more time at school. I strongly believe that the world ought to be changed because there's some problems in the world. And the key levers for change are transportation, housing, and food. That's what most people spend most of their resources on. And for me, bikes is the most cost-efficient and time-efficient way for me to propagate that change out into the world. And for each of you, it's going to be different. But I'm very passionate about that. I've stuck with it. And it's really great when you can find a product line that lines up with a cause, because it's a fantastic business pitch. People love it when their money supports something good that they believe in.
I think that's a powerful message. I am very grateful for having zero transportation cost. That is so different than when I was spending $500 to $1,000 a month on cars, and that is it adds up so fast. It's so hard to get out. But if you live in an area where you have high rent, high transportation costs, you are in trouble. It's like a really difficult to get out of that. So that's a cool space to be in that respect as well. I also want to point out that even though you're kind of the bike guy, you mentioned a lot of different ways to make money already. And on Craigslist, you're just looking for the value difference between what it costs and what it sells for, not necessarily your niche. And you've learned that eye to look for things. And I think that that's very true. It's much easier to double or triple your money right in the beginning, even 10 times your money when it's under $1,000. And then you just keep reinvesting that. So I want to ask maybe a different question on that respect, which is, did you have another source of income and you left the reselling money in there to grow, or how did you manage the growth of the company?
So a couple ways that I was able to grow. I live very, very affordably when I can. Like, I have very low fixed costs, and then I will play around with my variable costs, right? Like, if I'm doing super well, I'll take a trip, I'll go out to eat. I went to Europe for a month last year, but if I'm not doing well, my rent is low. The cost of, just feeding me and taking care of my phone bill and all that stuff is low. All the employees that I have working with me are 1099 contract workers. So if we have a bad time, I just start cutting people's hours, letting people go, cycling that. And that's part of the agreement and the arrangement that I have with them. And I help them find other employment. I did have another job. I worked full time for a futon company that sold primarily online. And I learned a huge amount about e-commerce, warehouse management, most importantly, customer relationship skills, like how to deal with an online sale, how to deal with an unhappy customer, how to turn an unhappy customer into a different sale or an upsell, and then how to handle shipping and packing and all that stuff of different kinds of objects. And so that was super helpful. I did that more than full time for about a year and a half while I was kind of on the side doing these other things. And then at a certain point, I saved up enough money where I said, look, I can try to make this work. And then I just went for it. And I've always had other sources of revenue. Like I make a decent amount of money each year doing business consulting for nonprofits and entrepreneurships and a little bit of just like pricing for another company that I work with because I'm good with Excel. And I think it's really important to have a wide variety of revenue. And I think it's really important to keep your fixed costs low and then play around with your variable costs as your revenue changes.
That's a great point. People with low fixed expenses also have low investment mentally. If you have a lot of stuff, that's a lot of your brain also occupied with that as well that you can be using on business. And you also diversify with consulting. And I think that everyone in this group should be thinking about that as well, because you're developing a skill that's not so easy. So with these 9 people, do you have, are they part-time workers? I'm curious, how do they structure their days?
So it's 9 full-time equivalents. So it's actually closer to like 13 people who work with us, but it ends up being like 9 40-hour blocks, 9 40 hours that are scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of them do direct themselves. So we've got a couple different bike mechanics, and they work with the local walk-in service work, custom builds for people. I sort of compare the bike shopping experience that it ought to be like a suit shopping experience, like very high level of customer service. The dollar amount is anywhere from $100 to $2,000, $3,000 in the part of the market that we occupy. There's fitting associated with it. There's what color do you like? What are your needs related to all of that? And so the mechanics can work with them and they can get the bikes tuned up right. They'll service people's bikes. We charge $65 an hour for service. So that's very, as long as we're bringing in more service, each of those mechanics is profitable. And then we have a dedicated social media person who does marketing and event management on our charitable side. We have a volunteer coordinator who is also our prime photographer. And then we have one guy who does listing, and then I also do listing. And I really need to hire another person for listing. And then we have one person who does packing. And then we've got a couple of kids who are interns. And then we have a bunch of instructors for our free classes. And the instructors also all act as salespersons. So when somebody walks in the door to one of our free classes, we can kind of assess their economic situation. And we can say, okay, well, we'll help you get a free bike if you need it. If you don't need it, you should, spend some money on new parts or a bike or whatever. And the instructors can sort of help judge that and help people get the transportation they need at the budget that works for them. And then they do direct most of their own work. And then some of the work is directed sort of by the board of directors making decisions about what kinds of charitable programs we're going to offer.
Okay. So we do have a question from Terrell. Do you have any suggestions to improve warehouse management, or do you use any custom software, or do you have a general philosophy?
So we wrote our own custom macros and software in Excel in order to manage inventory, because we're in a situation where I haven't actually found any good products for this. We have a smallish number of SKUs. I probably only have about 1,000 items listed on listings on eBay at any given point in time, plus the duplicates from WebInterpret, plus like the multi-quantity items. And almost all of those have parts and labor added. So we just wrote sort of macros in Excel in order to manage that and keep track of all of the costing. When I was in business school, I took a intermediate accounting class for cost accounting. So just to kind of keep track of like, how much does it actually cost you to produce each of these individual semi-custom units? Mm-hmm. We've started using, what is it called? We started using a POS system, mm-hmm. Lightspeed. We started using Lightspeed. Lightspeed's great for inventory management. Once you can get all that stuff integrated, it makes sense. There's a big cost to adding. I like to think of, so you look at the whole value flow. You get the product that shows up, and then you look at, how do I touch it? How do I handle it? How do I take pictures of it? How do I fix it? How do I describe it? How do I post it? How do I ship it? How do I do the post-sale delivery? And you want to break down all the things you sell into these different sorts of product categories. For me, I've got bikes, I've got frames, I've got parts of this kind, and I've got parts of this kind. And I recently started adding Pendleton blankets, which is like a high-end American manufacturer that can sell for hundreds of dollars per unit easily. And then you look at, how can I improve this? And part of that is your shelves. How do you label where all your stuff goes? Well, now you have to take time away from listing, away from shipping, in order to think about the best way to organize it. If you're going to use a POS system, you have to take time away from making money in order to figure out how to integrate your POS system or your custom inventory management system into the way that you already have your inventory and physically orienting all of the stuff in order to work with that. And it just adds these little percent efficiencies into what you're doing. And this is actually one of the big benefits of specializing, is you start getting really good at, well, how do I physically manage the flow of stuff through the space in a way that a person who hasn't been doing this for 5 years can't do, which reduces my delivery cost by 4%, reduces my handling cost by 20%, so on and so forth. And so just really looking at your overall flow and how you can improve those systems. And there's lots of free classes online about industrial organization. Kaizen system is good. The Sigma 6 system is good. There's a bunch of stuff like that. You can look on Wikipedia and they'll talk about different things. Gantt charts can be useful tools. There's low-cost classes at business schools or community colleges that you can take as well about this. But I found it to be super helpful. But it's always you're always making these like bets. You're always making these risky investments, and you don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. And sometimes that's like $8,000 on a $100K, face value product. Sometimes it's cutting back on your listing and your selling and your shipping in order to implement a better inventory management system or come up with an inventory management system that works for what you've got. But I've found managing my inventory better, especially as the total volume of inventory grows. We have 3,600 square feet. So that's a lot of stuff. Bikes take up a lot of space. We sort of custom designed these 6-foot deep shelves in order to have high capacity storing that like works with the fire code. We bought thousands of dollars of steel shelving online for small parts. And then we had to take the time to organize it all and take the time to train everybody on this is where everything goes. But the returns have been really, really great. Does that answer the question?
It does answer the question. And you also mentioned potentially cutting back on revenue generating activities while you're working on that. That's exactly how like Kaizen and a lot of these production philosophies work. You don't work on money making when you're fixing something or improving something 1%, because it takes that full focus to do that. And I never really referred people to free online classes. That's fantastic, because most of this stuff already exists. You can watch it in practice.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
The basic concepts of like, this is a value flow, this is your industrial production process, and just like understanding that intuitively and then being able to connect it to what you're doing on a daily basis, that you can pick up pretty quickly without getting a business degree, just by reading some stuff on Wikipedia, looking at some news articles, and then like applying it and writing it down, or taking some classes from people who train you, how to do stuff on YouTube or other sorts of channels. You don't need to have this huge investment into a $50,000 college education in order to really understand the basic concepts and how they apply to your business specifically.
Or a $10,000 a week lean consultant or something. You can do the basics online. So I have a question. Do you have a daily stand-up meeting, or do you meet with your people once a day? How do you organize this staff?
We do it once a week, kind of letting people know what's going on. We're very collaborative. Like a lot of people, so we do a flat pay rate. Everybody gets $15 an hour. And then if we do really well, everybody gets a raise. And everybody's gotten a raise every like couple months for the past like 3 years. And Madison, Wisconsin has a lower cost of living than New York, but a higher cost of living than Boise. It's about like $600 for a 1-bedroom apartment here. So just for some context. And then there are some benefits that come with that as well. But yeah, we do a weekly meeting, and then I meet one-on-one with people, and a lot of the people have a ton of autonomy. Like my social media person, like I just trust them that they're going to do what they do best. And I kind of understand some of what they do, and I don't understand other parts of what they do. The packing people show up at 7 a.m. and just start going. We do 1-day handling time. And that's really great for best match on eBay. Absolutely. And they just go, and there was a training time where I had to kind of, because you as the business owner like understand the whole process, and then you integrate somebody into the process, and you have to train them up to the point where you can trust them, and then you just let them go. Some of it's creating priorities, like shipping is always number one. Like we never want to have any late shipping defects. So that's always number one. People do that first. I don't have to supervise that. It just goes out the door. People take care of it.
On this, what about your turnover rate? At this rate, are staying? Do you have high turnover?
Not really. I mean, so I had some people turn over really fast. I had one kid I hired, he was here for like 2 weeks and then he just stopped showing up. That's a risk that you take with teens and younger kids that you're working with. There are certainly some advantages usually where there might be some subsidies for training or some grants, particularly with disadvantaged kids, where there might be a government grant or something like that that will help offset that cost. Or you can also definitely like pay kids less than you pay adults. But the turnover rate's a lot higher with people who don't have rent, they haven't like figured out how to interface with work yet. I made the mistake of hiring friends early on, and I don't really recommend that. I would really recommend do the time to search for the right people who are not your friends, because if they're your friends, it's gonna cloud your decision making. You're going to not fire them when you should, and then it's going to create more and more of a problem. And this isn't true 100% of the time. I'm sure that there are definitely situations where it does work out, but I've had sort of negative experiences there where I had somebody on staff for 2 years that I should have had on staff for 6 months. And it's a cliche. People are your best resource, but also like people in your organization who are not fully committed, who are not really excited about the project and are not sharing the long-term gains and benefits from the project, and then are acting against the organization's interest, can really, really hurt your business. And I would say like pay your people well, because you get what you pay for. And if they're not performing at the level that you need them to, take the time to search for more people.
That's also very powerful that you shared the average living cost. I don't think people take that into account. If you pay people as little as possible and they can't pay their bills and they're not focused because they need to find other forms of income to make it. At $15 an hour, that means that your paycheck is a quarter of your rent. So you could pay your rent after a week. You could definitely get by. But
Yeah.
if it's less than that, you're in trouble, because people will have to moonlight, or you'll be potentially on the back burner sometimes.
Yeah. And what we do and what we ask our employees to do is skilled labor, like how to pack things, like not clothing as much, but when you start getting into hard goods, how to pack things and save money, especially international shipping, how to get there safe, how to go through all of the different menus on eBay, on Pirate Ship, on PayPal, on the USPS account, and then check dimensions and pack stuff right and pad things right and do all of that. Like that takes a bit of skill and like understanding of the process. And, people should be compensated for that. And I've really found that paying people better and then expecting more from them works really well. Costco does really well with this model, as does a couple of other pretty much all of the big regional grocery chains, like Publix or Woodman's. They have this kind of model. They pay people well and they demand a very high level of work from them, and they succeed against Walmart in their regional area.
That makes sense. It's always been said a smaller company with higher paid people is better than a larger, or than the same revenue with more people that have lower pay. Do you have custom shipping software?
No, we just use eBay shipping, and then we use Pirate Ship occasionally. Actually, for the types of stuff that we sell, Pirate Ship is almost never cheaper. And then
Gotcha.
we occasionally use USPS because GXP, Global Shipping,
GSP.
GXG doesn't show up on Pirate Ship or PayPal or eBay, and sometimes that's cheaper. We ship probably 30% internationally. And large stuff like a box frame is like 32 inches by 22 inches by 8 inches and maybe 20 pounds. And so that's a little tricky. To Taiwan, that's maybe $300 via GXG. To London, maybe as low as 80. And so just figuring out those costs. There was if you guys aren't going to eBay Open, you should talk to people in your meetup groups who are, and like give them lists of questions. But last year there was a great seminar on shipping and how shipping complex stuff is a competitive advantage. If it's hard to ship something and expensive to ship something and you get good at it, then you can be underpricing your competitors by 10% and making an extra 10 or 20% because of your lower shipping costs, because you've figured out the best way to do it. Like a lot of people charge 150 or 200 to ship a complete bike. My label cost can be as low as $10, $20, and it's never higher than 80. And then I structure in my build time in there too. And I'm always looking at that opportunity cost, like back to hiring people. I want to look at like, how much is my time worth? How much could I be making doing something else? And so for me, that's $65 an hour because that's what we bill for mechanics. And we have a week and a half of tune-ups waiting to be done at $65 an hour. And so that has to be the built-in cost added to your packing time for a complex object. And that has to be, if you hire somebody, they have to cost less than that. Not just their hourly, but also the like amortized time of hiring and training them, plus like all of the capacity around them. And so looking at that in terms of your decision making, like 15 an hour might sound like a lot, but like if you're generating 30 an hour or 40 an hour for all the time that you're spending doing customer service or describing or sourcing, you can spend more time doing that and less time doing packing, or less time doing warehouse management, or less time taking out the trash.
So this might be a question that hopefully doesn't throw you off guard, but let's say you're paying somebody $15 an hour and they're a full-time worker. That's $2,400 a month that you'd be paying them. Do you look at it as a percentage of revenue ever when you're determining if they're worth it?
Not as much as a percentage of revenue, more I want to look at like their productive time and then cash flow. And you get into this like intuitive, for me, it's intuitive. And there's definitely processes by which you can make this not intuitive, but I've been doing small business management for a long time and I kind of have a good handle on it. I take a look at my PayPal revenues. I take a look at where I am with bills. I take a look at what the buffer is. I take a look at what sorts of lines of credit I can have, given where we are in the yearly cycle, because bikes have a different kind of sales cycle than winter clothes, than seasonal items, than sporting goods or whatever. And I have to make an intuitive judgment of like, hey, am I going to make payroll? Am I going to have enough money to reinvest in this investment opportunity, this inventory? And then you sort of trim the amount of hours that you give people based off of that. And it's good to have some sort of thing that has a turnaround time of less than a month. Because you look at the investments that you make, and some of them take multiple months, like those putting in shelves or looking at your inventory management or hiring new people. Like that's not going to turn around your investment in less than a month. But what always turns around the investment in less than a month for me is local service. And that's kind of where being an expert in a particular hard good is super helpful. What always turns around in less than a month is a $5 Carhartt jacket at the bins. That's right. Always going to, so if you're using a virtual assistant or you're using, a local person in order to do your listing and you list 100 items, well, probably 10 of them will sell in a week. Probably 20 of them will sell in a month. And that'll probably recoup your cost of labor and your cost of sourcing if you're sourcing correctly. And then you have the long tail where the other 80 items take, 3 years to actually sell out all of them. But you keep stacking those long tails and you're generating this passive income from your past work. And there's a lot of investment in getting into that. And you kind of have to make these upfront sacrifices where like, I'm going to buy this inventory, I'm going to do this listing, I'm going to pay somebody to do this listing or whatever. And then you start getting this like stable cash flow. Another thing I'm really passionate, I tell a lot of people about when I do meetups or when I do consulting, is you want to have a couple of different types of items that you're selling that have different selling characteristics. And so for me, selling these like cheap new items, medium priced new items, and expensive new items where I have multiple quantities, that means that the base level of my daily revenues never really drops below $500 a day online. And then I've got these $300, $1,000, $1,500 items. So that cash flow is super lumpy. The way that the algorithm works is if you have sales, your best match for all of your items goes up. And so by having sales on little stuff, it primes your expensive stuff. And the best stuff for that, in my experience, is multi-quantity items, because one of the biggest costs of a listing, it's really tough to sell a $30 one-off item or something less than $30 profitably, given the amount of time that you go into describing it and the customer service and managing the listing and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got 50 $20 items or 50 $10 items, you're making $1 each, 50 cents each after your expenses, but you're getting that daily sales level that pushes attention to your $300 items that you'll make 170 on.
You just mentioned something that I sometimes forget, which is you mentioned, let's say you buy 100 items at the Goodwill outlet, or you thrift some stuff, and then you sell a few in the first week and then a few over the first month. Usually by that point, if you are breaking even, you're in a very good place. And a lot of people purchase that way. Can I get my initial investment back in a month? And then I'll just wait. As long as I'm not going cash flow negative, this is just money for later. That's a good way to do it. If you are just getting started, 100% long tail is probably not the way to go, because you'll run out of money. So that's a very cool point. Can you give us an idea of what your day looks like?
Well, you got to take care of yourself. A lot of people, they're always like, don't sleep, do all this stuff, work hard, just work harder, work harder. And like, I totally reject that mindset. Sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. Like, just do it. If you have to sacrifice your social life, if you have to sacrifice drinking, if you have to sacrifice going to concerts, like whatever, sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. Do some sort of self-care, like yoga or lifting or meditation or running every day, first thing in the morning. It helps you. Like, often with customer service, you can get on tilt. People will say dumb things. They didn't read the ad. They're angry because they don't understand how to push a button and they can't turn on your product, like whatever it is. And that can put you on tilt if you're not in a good space for it. So have your time in the morning with your family, with your loved ones, with yourself, taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, making sure you're ready for the day. Then start the day and check all your customer service. See if you've got any urgent requests. Get back to people as quickly as possible. If they're angry about something, get back to them, be nice. If they're happy about something, get back to them, be nice, sell them more stuff. If they have a question about an object, get back to them, send them an offer. eBay has a hidden metric that they'll talk to you about if you go to some of the presentations that eBay employees do. It's responsiveness. They don't talk about it on the website at all, but there's a score there that if I think it's based off of your average response time to queries, and whether or not you respond to queries. You should respond to literally every single question or comment or message anybody ever sends to you, and you should try to respond to that as quickly as possible. And for me, I set boundaries where I'm not doing it at 6 a.m. like I'm doing yoga at 6 a.m. But I'm doing it at 8 every day except for Sunday. And I do take one day off a week where I don't look at screens and I don't do coffee, because I think it's important to like reset that. But yeah, take care of yourself. And then once you've got in and you've taken care of the basic customer service stuff, and again, this is me with somebody already packing and shipping at 7 a.m. So you might want to be packing and shipping first thing. Then I start looking at other sorts of things. Are there any deals that I can get? Are there any, great wholesale deals? Do I have anybody locally who's trying to sell me stuff? What does the work order look like for local things? What sorts of things are going on ahead in the future? Do we have any charitable events that are not budgeted out, that we don't have a person scheduled for? Are there any meetings with outside partners that we have that kind of we need to plan? Have a little bit of reflection, look at your schedule, look at what your commitments are that you've made to outside parties, and make sure that you're going to be following through on those. And then start looking at maybe listing new product, maybe managing people to list new product. It can be really helpful to schedule out when you do listing. So we usually try to have about 100 to 150 listings. And again, we sell on average like $300 items. Even with it being diluted by the cheap items, like the bigger items we sell are pretty expensive, which specializing helps you do that. And start looking. Sorry, hold on a second.
No worries.
Lost my train of thought there.
No
what was
worries.
the question?
The question was, what does your day look like?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and start seeing if there's places where you can push out marketing, or if there's projects you can work on to get more stuff in the pipeline. A lot of people have difficulty sourcing. I find sourcing to be really easy. Once you become an expert in a field and people know that you're an expert in a field, they start bringing you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They start showing up, giving it to you, selling it to you for pennies on the dollar, like all of that. And so looking at how much space do I have in my storage, in my inventory, here's some stuff people are trying to give me. Do I want to take this on? About 1,000 things listed, and I have about 2,000 more bikes in my warehouse that are not listed. And so for me, the biggest bottleneck is photography and listing. And I sell a decent amount, 10 or 20% of everything I list every month, which it's hard to get beyond 20, 25%. Like, it's really, really tough to have. If you have turnover higher than 25%, your prices are too low. And that's the other thing too, is like, I'll start looking at managing my prices, my ad rates, so my shipping charges, what sorts of sales am I looking. So towards the middle of the day, I start looking at how can I increase my future revenue? And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. If you're selling more one-off items, you can reprice entire categories and then run sales. Like a great one is reduce it items that have watchers by 5.01%. Items that have a price drop of more than 5% will propagate notices to watchers. If you increase your prices day one by 5.01%, and then day two, you decrease your prices on items that have watchers by 5.01%, it will propagate out notices. If you do this over the course of, like, say 200 or 300 items, you'll get a couple sales in a day. And if those items are like $100 to $300, then you've boosted your sales in a 2-day period by $500 to $1,000. And so that's a trick, and you want to time it though. So we list about 150 items between Thursday and Monday, some items every day. And then we always list at least 5 items every day as best we can. And that helps keep everything up in best match. And as you guys know, like, understanding how Cassini works and understanding how best match works really, really helps to drive sales and traffic to your stuff. Because there's lots of people who want to buy things, but the people who want to buy things and are willing to pay the most money are the worst at finding them. And they want to find it right now. Because the people who are good at finding it, who are starting to be experts, are big enthusiasts, and they know all the keywords, they know all the alternate keywords, they know how to spot things by looking at them. They think your prices are too high because they saw that at a garage sale for $5 once. How dare you price it at $100? That's unreasonable. And I think we've all gotten those messages.
That is incredible advice. People who are good at finding stuff don't overpay.
No, absolutely not.
That makes sense.
Make it easy, price it high, and make it easy for people to find your stuff.
There's so much good stuff in that, Elijah. I just want to point out, when you're talking about your day, the first part of your day is self-care. So it's sort of self-focused, and you need that to get through the rest of the day. But the second part of your day is customer focused. So you move from caring for yourself to your customer with answering customer service, shipping, that you prioritize that. And then you have the relationship where you're looking for new deals, new people, maybe you have meetings with people. And then at the end, you're focused on maybe the listing part of the day, which is just making sure that the wheel is greased. You have you have all the focus on sell-through rate, making an improvement, all these tips and tricks. That is a really good way to start your day. I would say that's a good indication of how you treat your life. Yourself important, then your customers, then how to get stuff to your customers, how to deliver
customer
it.
service is super emotionally draining. Like, if you've worked in a call center, if you've worked in a restaurant, if you've worked in a sales position, you are burning emotional energy because you are listening to what is the needs of this person who may be angry, may be happy, whatever. What are their needs right now, and how can I meet their needs? Not necessarily by selling them more stuff. I mean, honestly, relationship building is super important there, because if they trust you, they'll come back for $1,000 sale later, or they'll remember, that sort of interaction because you help them. Even if, like, I'll direct customers to other sellers if I don't have what they have, if I feel like the other seller is good and I feel like the other seller has the product that they're looking for. And then those people will come back to me and they'll say, oh, I need this now. But it takes a lot of intention and it takes a lot of emotional energy in order to read what people need, in order to be patient with unhappy people, in order to, one of my employees jokes that I'm a bike therapist because like old dudes will call me and then talk to me for 35 minutes without buying anything about all the bikes that they have and how great they are. And what it is their wife and their kids are tired of listening to them talk about their hobby. And then in that 35
So
minutes,
true.
I have all of these opportunities to say, hey, I've got this, I've got that. Let me send you some links. Take a look at this. If you're interested in doing a custom build in the fall, check it out. Here's some like rough budgets and some pictures of examples. And you can mine all of this information that you can then use to say, how can I profitably, in the long term, meet this person's needs and build a relationship with them? But all of that takes a lot of energy. And if you're not taking care of yourself, it's too easy to be curt with people. It's too easy to respond to dumb questions with dumb answers. You know, it's too easy to go on tilt and get angry at somebody who wants a return or wants to cancel something or didn't read the ad. And it's too easy to miss tells that people want to spend more money than they're saying they want to spend initially.
That's incredible. Most of the time, it's just a mixture of being hungry and tired that
Yeah.
produces that end of customer service where they're reaching out because they're unhappy or unfulfilled, and you're responding back. Worse is when both people are hungry and tired. Then it's going to be a terrible conversation. So Brooks is asking, would you make more money if you focused on a few revenue outlets versus multiple projects? Right now, as you grow, and as most people who grow say, there are more opportunities now than when you started. How do you pick, and then how do you manage multiple projects?
Well, start with one thing and do it right, and then move on to another thing. For the longest time, we didn't sell on eBay because there was a big barrier. We just flipped on Craigslist. I would buy things low on Craigslist and sell them high on Craigslist. We didn't even do customer service. People would come in and they say, hey, can you fix my bike? And we'd say, no, we don't fix bikes here. We teach you how to fix bikes.
Mm.
That's all we do. We do education and we flip bikes on Craigslist. So that was the start. And then over time, we added new products. We started thinking about, well, how can we add service? What would that value flow look like? What sort of space would we need? Who would we need to hire for it? What kinds of inventory do we need to keep in stock in order to maintain adequate standards for turnaround time and quality? And you sort of look at the problem and you say, I can add any of these 4 lines. What do I think I'm going to make off of this? There's an intuitive decision that you can make, and that's going to be based off of your experience. And then there's a sort of factual decision that you can make. There's a lot of tools that are taught in business school or business courses about the factual decisions. A lot of it come down to like discounting the net present value of future cash flows and making assumptions about, okay, if I invest $1,000 in this $4,000 MSRP product, and I see this on the market in terms of solds, the sell-through rates, whatever, then I can expect that the $4,000 will come back to me over a certain period of time. And then I can, using a financial calculator, determine what the net present value of those assumed future cash flows are going to be. So that's one decision-making framework. And it's actually, it's pretty simple. I mean, you can look up financial calculators online, you can plug in numbers, but the big thing there is you're making assumptions, and you can draw those assumptions off of Worth Point, you can draw those assumptions off of Terapeak, Solds, different things like that. But as you get better and better at the specific like area that you're in, you'll be able to make a lot of those decisions kind of in a mix of intuitive plus like cost basis. And for me, like what you were talking about before, I'm going to buy $100 of stuff. I need the $100 to come back to me in a month, and I need 50% or 70% of the product to be out there after that. You can think about that with your new products, new projects. And you can say, well, how much is it going to cost me to implement this line, both in terms of my time and my money, but also the opportunity cost for these other things? Do I have the capacity to do that? And I would say you get it right first with something that you can do really well, and then slowly add things, get them right or drop them. And there have been projects that we started years ago. We started trying to sell bike wheels on eBay. It didn't work. And then we just didn't do it for 5 years. And then a month and a half ago, we were like, okay, well, let's list the bike wheels and see what happens. It took us about half a month to list 400 pairs. And now we're selling like 3 pairs a week at an average sell price of 150 each. So that's an extra $450 plus shipping on top of that we make a little bit of a margin on usually, unless it's going to California, that we've added. But it took us like a good chunk of people's time to figure out how to best do that. And we were still making a bet because we weren't sure if the market would bear it. And you can kind of see in Solds and Terapeak and whatever what the market is doing, but you also have to make this intuitive interaction. And honestly, like I said before, the places where there isn't a lot of market information and you're an expert in is the places where you can make the highest margins, because you have less competitors and people don't know what's going on. The less transparent the market is, the higher margins you can make and the more money you can lose.
That's true. So I appreciate your time. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions. Michael in New York City is asking, so for example, the Pendleton blankets that you came upon, that's not necessarily a bike related product. How does stuff like this make it into your store? How do you evaluate opportunities?
So I'm still evaluating Pendletons. I've got about 40 pieces right now. I've been evaluating it for about 6 months. I don't spend a lot of time in it. It's something I'm passionate about because I'm part native. I love that Pendleton has a good relationship with tribes, and they pay licensing fees to native artists, and they hire native employees, and they've had a good relationship with native tribes for over 100 years. It has a huge level of, it's a prestige American brand. It's got a lot of characteristics that like make sense to add. And I'm personally passionate about the art. And my risk mitigation here is if I get stuck with the product as a collector's item, it's okay. I'm happy with that. And you always have to be willing to lose. Whenever you add a new product line, you always have to be willing to lose. You always have to be capable of losing and have some sort of plan for what happens when you lose. And for me, it's just, I keep the product, I put it on my wall, give it away to friends and family, and I have the revenue from the other thing. And I'm starting small, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to continue doing that. Like, I don't even know yet if it's going to make sense for me to scale that to a significant point. Some of it's the supply. Like, bikes are really easy for me to get infinite supply. Part of why you can make lots of money on Pendletons is because they're very rare. It's hard to find 1920s Indian pattern Chief Josephs and so on and so forth. So people pay $300 for them, but you can't go buy 50 of them in a weekend.
Right. Amazing. So Bill has a question. This will be the final question. What percentage of revenue is the physical store, e-commerce, education? How do you break down all these different revenue streams?
It's maybe 50% to 70% online, and the rest of it's local. It's hard to say with grants just because like they're managed a little bit separately because they have their own deliverables, and they sort of go through a separate legal entity. Probably in the 50 to 70% range is online sales. And we do get stuff directly from a website. I do get people who call me up from out of state and say, hey, I want this. I want to spend this much money. And then I help them do that. And I do the billing through PayPal, or I do the billing through an over-the-phone credit card payment with an email contract or whatever. But yeah, about 50 to 70%. It used to be less than that. And honestly, I think like e-commerce is just growing and growing and growing. The brick and mortar helps to lend credibility to your online sales. Years ago, I wanted a coin, an ancient Greek coin, as a gift for a friend. And I hunted and I hunted and I hunted, and I ended up buying from a store primarily because there's lots of fakes out there. With antiquities, there's lots and lots of fakes out there. I ended up buying from a store that had been in business for 130 years. They had an eBay storefront. They sold on eBay, but they primarily had a store, and I felt confident doing that because of that experience. And a lot of people are going to feel more confident buying from an online retailer that clearly has a storefront because they're going to be more professional. And so having some level of local sales will help your online sales and will help people's confidence in your online sales. And you can say, look, I'm not just cleaning out my garage. I'm not just like doing this out of my house. I do sales by appointment out of an office. I have a storefront. We are a serious business, and we charge serious business money, and you get serious business service.
That is brilliant advice. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to serve my audience, and hopefully people on YouTube will find this very useful. Take a moment, if you can, in the audience to go to the description below and click the link to vote. And Elijah, where's the best place people can find you?
On eBay, Freewheel Bikes Madison. And if you go click on that link, there's a video, like a 1-minute video showing the inside of our shop. You should check it out and kind of some of the production that we do. And then there's links there to the eBay store. And then you can also find me at McCloskey Elijah on Instagram as well. I've got some stuff up on there that's interesting.
Thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Take care.